Welcome to the 5. The same 5 questions, a completely different experience every time.
I met today's guest online, and he is just a funny, genuine, really cool, really smart guy, and probably have been talking with him for almost 2 years now. And so why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thanks very much. G'day, everyone. My name is Gabe Woods. I'm a content creator from Sydney, Australia, and I make a bunch of content for all sorts of places, everything from modeling to the spicy stuff to just funny comedy on my page. And yeah, just really leaning into the digital creation space and doing, shows like this. And one of the things I have one of the perks of, I guess, my job is meeting really cool people like yourself. And yeah, so here we are.
So you know the drill. I'm going to ask you 5 questions. You can take as much time as you want. Just answer them, and we'll get started.
So it's a bit like a story time, right?
It is. I am about to hear the story of Gabe Woods, and I am very excited for this.
Some great stories. They're really good questions, and some of them, will go places. So I hope everyone's got their tears and their tissues ready. Some of these are not the lightest questions.
They aren't, but I think these questions bring out like the realness in people, and that's really what I want to see. So I'm excited. You ready?
Absolutely.
What's the weirdest thing that's ever happened to you?
I thought about this one because I am not a superstitious person at all. And this happened to me quite young. So I don't believe in ghosts, and I don't believe in spirits or anything like that. It's not my vibe because I'm very logical. I'm much more scared of like everyday things. I'm so much more scared of getting hit by a car than being haunted by a ghost. And it's strange because like I love horror films, but horror films to me are hilarious. Like the idea that I say to my friends, this is what I said. I was like, in movies where you can be possessed by a demon, right? And the demon takes control of your body and basically, you can sort of like all these terrible things happen to the person who's possessed. But I'm like, are you conscious while you're being possessed? Because if there's a point where the demon takes full control, it's basically like a free pass. Like, you can do whatever you want. And you can be like, oh, it was the demon. I was possessed. Like, forget about last week when I turned around and vomited all over your house. That was the demon. Because there's definitely been some times in my life where I wish I could have said, oh no, I was possessed. So sorry about that, guys. Happens so often, So I don't believe in that sort of stuff, but we were helping some of our relations move into a new house on the central coast of Australia. So that's like an hour north of where I live. And it's a very like beautiful coastal sort of town. And they live there's like a big sort of steep mountain, and they live like up in these beautiful like suburbs that are built onto the side of the mountain. It's very like, there's a lot of bush. I don't know, there's a place where, like, you need to imagine there's like a house and the property is huge, like you don't even really see your neighbours. And this was like this beautifully architecturally designed house, and it was sort of a U shape, and the rooms were sort of divided. And it had really high ceilings, and it was a really beautiful house to move into. Anyway, I was helping basically my cousin move into his room, and we were just setting his room up and helping and chatting and playing games, and we would be young, like I would have been 7 or 8 or 9 or something like this. And the afternoon sun started to come in through the windows, and the whole room had like that timber cladding on it. Are you familiar? It's like instead of paint or something on the wall, it's like rows of like wood. And we were looking up because these ceilings were really high, remember? And there was like a tiny shadow, maybe a square, to like an access the roof space, right? And we were like, oh, there's a access space up there, right? And so we got a ladder and we opened this access space. This is not a joke. I'm not bullshitting this at all. we went go into this space, and it was kind of like an attic space between two of the rooms. This house was really big. Like I say, it's a U shape, but these rooms were enormous. They were double height. Like it was very architectural. And we go into this space between the rooms that had a circular window on one end, and then sort of the eaves of the house meeting in the middle. I shit you not, in this room, there was a white paint pentacle on the ground and a small like table, because we were 7 at the time. I had no idea about like devil worship or occultism or anything like that. And we walk into this room, and like to kids, all we were seeing was paint on the floor, a pattern on the floor, and basically a little table that had a black cloth over it and a knife and a cup and black candles everywhere. So we were like, oh, this is weird, but, you know, like, I don't really know what this all means. So I went and got my dad at the time and the adults, and they were like, just come out of the room for a minute, boys. Like, and they literally, it was so Australian what they did. They just went up there with a bucket and a mop, and they wiped it out, and they put boxes in that room. And I remember at the time, it wasn't distinctly weird to me, but then as an adult learning about those things and looking back, I was like, did the people who owned this house, were they secretly like Satanists or devil worshippers or occultists? But then it just makes me laugh because my like parents' response at the time was just like, make it a storage space, you know. And I was like, probably there's a demon in that room that has to just deal with like toasters being in its face for the rest of its life. And I was just like, that's probably the weirdest thing that has ever happened to me. And honestly, besides that, I've had a pretty boring, like nothing special life. So I think I scared the shit out of myself because I bought a new mirror. And I forgot that I bought a mirror in the middle of the night. So I went up to do a wee and I absolutely screamed because I was like, fuck, there's another guy in my apartment. But it was me. So that puts me on par with like one of those birds in a cage that's pecking at their little like mirrors. So yeah, so that was the weirdest thing that happened to me. I found a potentially satanic altar in a spare room in a house that my cousin moved into.
That's quite the housewarming right there.
So strange. So I didn't even, like, it's not a big thing in Australia, like Satanism and occultism and witchy stuff. Like, Australians are not, like, we go to the beach and have barbecues. It's not like we're out here summoning Beelzebub into our rooms. It's just not the vibe. And so it was really weird to see that because, like, I don't know, it's got to be super rare. And I have no idea what happened to the cup. Probably someone polished it and uses it as like a wine cup or something.
That is a very Australian way of looking at things. It's like, just put him up there, put the demon to moving boxes.
Yeah, get that demon to work. We're not paying a mortgage on this place to some freeloader to live up in the attic. You know, get some boxes up there and get a cloth and wipe down that dust. That's absolutely Australian. So yeah, that's the weirdest thing that ever happened to me. But at the time, because I was little and I didn't know what those things meant, like it wasn't weird to me at the time because we were just exploring and we were kids. There was also, oh my God, how could I forget this? There was also a bunch of weird paintings up there, right? And the paintings were like, I don't know how to explain this. They were like Nazi paintings, like of like, you know, Nazi generals. And then they had like their armbands like blacked out with paint. It was very strange. It was very weird. And all they did was literally punch a hole through it and put it in a bin. That's all they did. And I was like, okay, like, obviously that's what you're supposed to do with that shit.
I can see the house listing. It's like Nazi devil worshippers seek to sell home.
Sell idyllic architectural house in Everglades. Yeah, 100%.
Yes, very quaint. You can hold rituals whenever you want.
Yeah, but the house was so beautiful. Like, it was a really, like, I feel like the house was so beautiful that the level of evil that you would need to make it look evil is like intense. That's probably why they could get away with Satan worship, because it's like there couldn't be a Satan worshipper in that beautiful architecturally designed, gorgeous mansion on the hill. Anyway, we can move on. I think that's all I've got for that one.
Okay, what is the scariest thing that's ever happened to you?
Oh, this is probably a pretty Australian one. So, I do lifeguarding, or I did do lifeguarding at one point. So lifeguarding, you guys aren't really near any coasts or like lakes. Do you have like lakes and stuff nearby?
Yeah, I live right close to it. Tennessee is full of lakes and rivers and everything like that. And most Americans, our vacation points are always going to some kind of beach somewhere. So Florida, the South and North Carolina and stuff like that for this area.
So, that south coast of America, that's not exposed to the ocean and it's kind of protected by that big, it's the Bay of Mexico, is that right?
The Gulf of Mexico.
It's a Gulf of Mexico, that's right, thank you. And it's very like calm waters, it's very chill, until you get a cyclone that goes through, unfortunately. We don't like that happening. But the waters, like most of the beaches in Australia face directly east, or where like I'm on the east coast, and they face directly east, and very few of them are protected or facing in an orientation where it's calm. So Australians have to learn very quickly to be good swimmers to go to the beach, because we get big surf. That's why there's so much there's a big surf culture in Australia. And it's really like the water can be deep and it can be fast and the waves can change. So you need lifeguards on the beach. And if for anyone listening, if you're a tourist who wants to come to swim in Australia, it's really safe to do so. You can absolutely come for a swim. There's all this crap about sharks and stingers and all of that nonsense. You will be safe. Just swim between the flags and speak to your friendly lifeguards, and they will help you. So why this relates to my scariest story is a time I've nearly drowned. And what had happened was, I had been, basically someone had called for help and I swam out, and that person was really close to going under, which is when they've completely exhausted themselves from swimming. And I got them onto my basically longboard, and I was paddling in, and then another person right next to them got caught in the same rip. And I pulled that person onto my board as well, which is really hard to get two people onto your board. And I basically had to paddle those guys in. And as I paddled them in, the surf was really like pounding, and I fell off. And there was three of us in the water, and we got pulled back out further than where I had picked these guys up from without my board. And I was I had my it's like a loop. It's like a flotation device. And basically, when a person's drowning, they sort of become a bit animalistic, and they're not really thinking about you. They're just thinking about how they can stay on top of the water. And it doesn't matter how good a swimmer you are. They will grab you and they'll try and force you under the water. So you kind of have to make a choice, which is you throw the floaty to them and you swim away and try and figure it out. Unfortunately, there were two people in this situation and myself. One person I had to choose to throw the thing to, because that person really was in a lot more danger, and the other person was still paddling. And I probably had about 20 seconds to get my board back, get both of these people on the board and catch away, hopefully to get the people into the water. And yeah, I was really tired and I was running out of energy and I was in a bad situation myself. So I knew that someone would be coming soon to help. So I only had to sort of last a minute. But I was treading water probably for a minute. And that doesn't sound like too long for everyone, but remember that the people who are drowning are really panicking and you can't help them. You have to just sort of stay close. And then one of these people in that minute was really going under. So I kind of made the decision to break the rule and get close to the person who didn't have the flotation device. And all I did was try and hold them at a distance up with one hand. Lucky I'm a big boy, so I can kind of stay away and keep them up. And then one of my mates came And it was just really tricky because not only of the moral situation, but because I was getting tired and this rip was really fast and deep and we were being pulled out very quickly. Yeah, it was really testing and scary, not only because you're in deep water and it's a difficult situation and you're trying to think of your training, but you're scared for yourself that you're going to drown because the waves are really big. The rip was really strong. The wind was going everywhere. And these people are panicking and screaming. And, you know, yeah, it was pretty scary. It wasn't a very nice experience, but everyone's safe. My friend came and he pulled my board and got the board to me and I could get myself onto the board. And I grabbed the person and we got everyone back to shore. So, God, this is me. Tourism Australia. It's so much fun. No, it's just, please remember that the lifeguards will always put the flags in the safest place to swim. And I think because so many people around the world swim in pools and lakes and rivers, you look at calm water and go, oh, that's the safest place to swim. But in Australia, it's the reverse. Usually calm water in Australia means that there's a rip. And do you know what a rip is? Is a rip a very common...
Riptide?
Yeah, a riptide. It's like, I say to everyone, a beach is like a big bathtub, right? And the ocean is constantly pouring water into the beach, the bath, right? And basically a rip is like the sinkhole, right? That's where the ocean has to run back out. Otherwise, the beach would just pile up onto the beach and it'd flood the whole suburbs and it'd keep going, right? So all that water that's piling up from the waves has to go somewhere. And so when there's a patch of calm water, that's usually because the water is moving so quickly back out to the ocean that these waves can't form and complete their orbit, which is what you see when a wave crashes. So if you're a tourist and you're coming to Australia, look for the flags, and even if you see waves that are crashing, it's better to be where the waves are than it is to be near a patch of calm water. That's not to say that there are days when it's just really calm everywhere, but always look for the flags and swim between the flags and you'll be safe and you won't have to get into trouble like those poor people did, but they're okay now. And also, if you're not a confident swimmer, that's totally fine. Come to Australia and swim, but don't go out like right out the back. Like just get up to your hips, keep your feet on the sand, and you don't have to like be a hero or go touch the buoys at the back of the bay, because that might be in your hometown, it might be safe to do that, but 9 times out of 10 in Australia, that buoy is like a shark net or something that's like not something you should be touching. So keep to the shore and you'll be fine. So that was the most scary thing that probably happened to me. I was very panicked.
That's actually useful information too, that because like you said, most times the calm water would be what I would consider to be the safe water, but it makes completely sense what you said. So thank you. I plan on visiting Australia one day, and I plan on swimming while I'm there. So I'll remember this.
There's so many like beautiful places in Australia, and I think the way that I would describe the major cities are major cities just like yours, like Sydney. I feel like Sydney and LA have a very similar vibe. It's less, I guess LA is a lot more like Californian, and our closest like California is the Gold Coast. But in terms of scale, like the Gold Coast is like 1/10 of the size, well, not even 1/10, 1/50th of the size of Los Angeles. So it's like, if you're coming to Australia, there are these major centres, but actually the most beautiful parts of Australia are not the centres. Get in a car, drive along the coast and pull into towns. We have like major highways, so you can bypass all these small towns now, but actually these small towns, even if you stay in an old motel and it's like $100, these like beach towns have the best fish and chips, the best like, fish and chips very popular in America, like burger bars, like stuff like that. And like beaches that, I'm not joking to you, are like 4 kilometers of like pristine white sand and like just the most incredible beach you'll ever go to in your life. And a lot of them as well are like on the back of nature reserves. So you kind of have to hike from the car park to the beach, maybe a 15-minute walk. but it's just magic. It's like the water is like blue, the sand is white. You take a little esky, which is like what's an esky called in America? It's like a chili box, like a cooler box for picnics. Yeah, a cooler. You take one of those and you just sit on the beach for all day and you play games with your mates and go for a surf. And honestly, it's the best thing you'll ever do. And Australia is like really unique, like wildlife and beautiful forests that are, I think, really different from what you'll have seen in North America. And yeah, it's definitely go be an adventurer. Like the cities are great, but our cities aren't like American cities. Like American cities are like really big and like busy and stuff like that. Our cities are busy in the week and then everyone goes out to the bush for the weekends and has fun. So,
well, that was very insightful all the way around, and I'm glad you're still alive.
Yeah, 100%. I'm glad I'm still alive too.
So I guess we'll move on to the next question, which is, what has been the most memorable moment of your life so far?
This one, I feel like I'm going to struggle with. What are some examples of like memorable experiences that, how many episodes of this show have you done?
Right now, you'll be my 6th person that I've interviewed.
And where do these recordings, like where can people listen to these recordings and stuff?
So as of right now, I'm getting 8 episodes ready before a launch. So right now, yep. But once everything's ready, it's gonna be on YouTube. It'll be a podcast that you can get on Anchor, Apple, and Google, and it's also gonna be on my Instagram and TikTok. So double dipping all over the place.
Yeah. Awesome. I guess I'm pretty lucky because there's so many to choose from. It's difficult to choose one that's like a particularly standout memory. I guess, is it like the most amazing thing that's happened to me or just something that I find really memorable? Or
it's something that you find really memorable. It seems to be that when I ask the people, sometimes they're good memories. Most times it's been good memories. Sometimes they're not great memories and everything, and sometimes it's like very personal, like little things. Like it doesn't have to be like a major event if it's just was important to you, you know. So
yeah, okay, I think I've got one, and I just think because it was so ridiculous, and it just was one of those times where everything worked, and I was probably about 21 and I'm 30 now. I'm old. I'm joking, I'm not that old. And I was touring Italy with friends and we had stopped at a town, Garda, and there's a huge freshwater lake in Garda and it's stunning. It's I don't know if you've been watching White Lotus season 2, but it's like classic Italy, but instead of the Mediterranean, it's this beautiful lake and it was just incredible. And we'd had sort of 2 days of travel and it had been quite quiet, and I had sort of budgeted about 70 euros a day just for food and all this stuff, and I hadn't even spent 10 euros in the past 2 days, like just on dinner, and that had been included in the tour and stuff, so there was nothing that I'd spent that money on. So I had a little bit of extra cash, and they wanted to go and do a tour of some like candle making factory, and I was like, fuck candles, like that's so shit. I'm not going to go see someone pour wax. Like, I know how candles are made. It's no mystery. And so I said, I'm just going to go. You could, like this tour, you didn't have to be with the group the whole day. You could go and do your own thing. Just make your way back to the hotel, I guess. And I was walking along thinking I'm just going to have a day to myself. And my best friend who was traveling with me, he comes running back and he goes, "You're so right. Like, why the fuck are we going to go watch candles being made?" So we were walking along the shore of this lake, and it was like this beautiful promenade, and it's all sort of tiled, and there are these jetties that you could walk onto. And I see this sign, and it's like, rent a speedboat for 70 euros for 3 hours, includes free champagne. And I was like, done. I was like, sold. So we just immediately get this old Italian guy sitting in the deck completely asleep right next to the boat. And I said, oh, ciao. And he's like, you want to rent the boat? And I said, yeah, here's cash. Here's 80 euros. He's like, take your time, enjoy. I just want to describe what I was wearing because it was so like, I had like a white linen shirt, I had khaki pants, I had boat shoes. I looked like the most up yourself knob in like Italy. And I got on the boat with my friend and I fully expected the guy to get on the boat with us and drive the boat because this was like a James Bond boat. It was very cool. It was like wood and cream and the seats were red and there was like 2 seats at the front and like a big lounge at the back. And he had like Prosecco in the back with ice in it. And I was like, this is great. I'm going to sit on the back of a boat and enjoy this. And just as we like get in the boat, 3 of the girls from the tour who we'd made friends with came running back down the hill and they were like, we have to see one more candle being fucking made. We're so out. And they were like, boys, what are you doing? And I said, we hired a boat. And they're like, can we come? So they all got on the boat, right? And the Italian guy got another bottle of Prosecco and he brings it out. And he's like, anyway, here you go. And just throws me the keys. And I was like, I've never driven a boat. And he's like, it's easy. He's like, forward, back, side, side. There's the pedal. Don't hit anything. And then he slaps the boat and he pushes it off from the jetty. Never driven a boat. This is a speedboat. And he's like, go slow to start. And I was like, okay. It's like a full speedboat. So even just like a little tap was like going, right? Anyway, one of the girls had an iPod and we plugged the iPod in. And the first song that came up was like Madonna Holiday, which was so iconic. And we were just driving on this boat and we were speeding through this water and it was a beautiful day. And I was like living an Italian fantasy. And it's probably the most memorable experience of my life. When I have a bad day, that's what I imagine that I've like been doing because it was magic. It was like warm. It was Prosecco. We were drunk. Well, we weren't drunk driving a boat, but we were like having Prosecco on a boat and it was really amazing. It was magic.
You made it sound like it was going to be hard, and then you explained this like perfect memory that just even I'm living it in my head right now. So I think that constitutes as a good best memory.
Yeah. It's amazing what you think is memorable because there could be sad things or good things, but just how that day ended out, that we just took a chance and went for a walk and didn't have a plan and didn't have a schedule or anything like that, but just had I had my eyes open looking at this beautiful place and everything just fell into place. I mean, I didn't know how to drive a boat and it took me like 20 minutes to get my head around it, but like basically stick to the right of other boats and don't like get in the way of anything. It was probably super dangerous, but let's not go there because we're on the water and I was like, okay, is everyone holding on? Because I just want to see how like fast this could go. Like I want to give it a bit of grit. We got halfway up the like throttle, accelerator, whatever you want to call it. And we pulled back and we were like, do you know that moment when everyone just loses control laughing? And we're on the boat, like I couldn't breathe. I was laughing so hard. I was like, there's no way we can ever like blast it all the way to the top. So we were just chugging along in this very expensive speedboat, sipping Prosecco and listening to music. And it was just 10 out of 10. Sometimes you don't have to go fast to like enjoy yourself, but I'm glad we tried.
So the next question is probably going to take that down a notch because it's always the hard one.
It is. It's going to be a sharp juxtaposition.
So what is the saddest thing that's ever happened to you?
So this is a really difficult one because there have been some pretty sad moments in my life. But nothing is as sad as when multiple sad things happen to you in a relatively short time frame. And I mean, I've had some bad days and, you know, I lost my dad quite early. My dad passed away at 16 from a heart attack. And I lost my grandma, and she was she was the most amazing person you've ever met. And like I owe so much of my good looks and common sense to her. And my dad was an amazing person too. And that was very sad, but I've had so long to like process that because they both happened when I was relatively young. But I think probably the saddest thing that ever happened, the saddest thing that's happened in my memory was probably about 26, 27. And I just had this really bad run of events that culminated in like a really bad depression. And it also ties in with a pandemic. And so I think that's timely to discuss because a lot of people lost their jobs in the pandemic. And basically what happened is in the space of about 2 weeks, I lost 2 jobs, had to move out of the city, had to move back in with my mum, and basically my long-term relationship broke down. So the man I'd been in a relationship with for about 4 or 5 years, we broke up, and pretty much because it was my fault. And, I had to then move back in with my mum, which I love my mum and we get along very well. But I think that's such a knock to your confidence as a young person because you expect to be able to be independent and have freedom. And I absolutely have that. And my mum supports me in everything I do. But it's just you have this desire, I guess, and it comes from being a man to provide to others and be generous. And basically I had to just fall back on my mum because she's who I've got. And it was just a really awful time. And the jobs that I lost, one of the jobs was like my dream job. And they told me, you're just not, I basically did really well at this job. And I got to my 6-month interview, like my 6-month probation. And they said, you're just not the right fit for this corporate culture. And I was like, what? Like, it just was so personal because I'd done really well and I'd met all my KPIs, but basically they were saying it's not how good you are, you're just not the right fit. And I was like, okay, cool. So then I sort of fell back on another job and then the pandemic hit and that job was just gone. So, because that job there's no way to do it and be safe with the pandemic. So I sort of went from having 2 jobs and a career to nothing. So I was like, fuck, like, that was dreadful. And then I was dealing with the breakup, which was even harder. And I was basically back in like where my mum was at the time. That area is very conservative. Like it's the Bible Belt of Sydney, the northwestern suburbs. And as a very proud out gay man, everything that you have in the city in terms of your personal freedoms is just gone. How you even speak and act and conduct yourself completely changes. And I guess as well, I was away from all my friends as well. So I didn't have anyone immediately there to process these feelings with. And I couldn't see any of them because of the pandemic. And Australia had quite draconian like lockdown laws. And there's a lot of wealth inequality in Sydney, but it was particularly in the pandemic in the place where we were, like the western suburbs, which is a lower socioeconomic area. They had like police and like army people like patrolling to make sure people didn't leave their 5-kilometre radius, which is like, my God, it's like a George Orwell novel. Do you know what I mean? And it was so stupid because like if you're a permitted worker or if you're a healthcare worker, you could obviously leave your 5-kilometre zone. So in a sense, it was entirely redundant because these healthcare workers, these incredibly important nurses and doctors who worked in hospitals were bringing, and this was in the, findings afterwards, that it was like they were bringing back the virus to these areas and seeding it anyway. So it was just a really, really shit time. And I remember being, I don't know if I want to bring up the big S word, but very like suicidal. And I thought like, oh God, this is like the worst. And I couldn't see any light in the situation. I couldn't be like, there's no win for me here, and I can't get back to where I was, and I had no money, and I had no way of seeing my friends or have anything worth, doing, or everything I had come to hold meaning about myself had basically been pulled away. And I had to do some really hard, soul searching, because I remember at the time how my depression had sort of twisted my thoughts was that, I was a bad person and I was a failure and I just didn't do enough and I couldn't be enough and I never would be enough. So there was no point. And that got so intense. And I remember the feeling was so uncomfortable one day that I had to pull over to the side of the road, mainly because I was thinking about just running into a pedestrian crossing, like pulling into one of those dividers and just riding myself off and the car. And I pulled over because I thought that'll be a silly idea because the cleanup bill would be really expensive and then there'd be a traffic jam and there's a lot of traffic out there, so I didn't want to be a fuss. So I pulled over anyway. I had a bit of a cry in the car and I had this turning point and I was like, I actually can't be that bad. Like I said, I think what I learned out of that saddest moment of my life was and this probably goes into your next question actually, because it was specifically in this saddest time of my life that, and again, it wasn't a particular thing. I think it's really hard because I think of myself as a very resilient person, and it took all of those things to really bring me to my knees. And in a way, I'm so glad it did, because what I had to learn next, and this goes into, your next question. I'll let you ask the next question because there is light in this story. Ask the next question.
I'll ask the next question in just 1 second, but I can see we identify ourselves so much with our job. That's who we are, and where we live, that's who we are, and our friends, that's who we are. And you lost all that. You lost your sense of identity, which is really the worst thing, especially you're a proud guy. You couldn't be who you were. I hate that happened to you. I feel for you so much, because it's really the person you were. I mean, you lost your partner, you lost your job, you lost where you lived, you lost getting to be who you were. That's you were just almost erased, and I think that's the worst thing that could happen to somebody, and I hate that happened to you.
It was terrible, and I should be really clear, I didn't lose my friends.
I just meant you can't, during the pandemic, I felt, even though I have a really good friend group and everything, we didn't get to visit each other, and we're very close. We're those touchy-feely friends that hug each other every time we see each other, and we have these deep conversations. And it was they were there, but it's not the same when you can't be around them. It really felt, isolation was really what happened. You got isolated, but it also isolated you emotionally with everybody. So it was really rough.
I'm the same, our friendship group is really tight, but with any breakup, there's a bit of fracturing of friend groups, and that's just because I think friends want the best for you, even in bad circumstances, but naturally who was friends with who first and stuff like that does come to the surface, and people can see your hurt and they, I think, misattribute that hurt to the other person, but it's so much more nuanced than that. And you're right, the lockdown laws meant I couldn't see my friends, but that doesn't mean they weren't checking in on me or calling me every day, and I'm so grateful for the friendship circle I have. And even, my best girlfriend, I was having a bad day, and she was like, fuck it, I don't care. She's like, you're going to have to get a cop to pull me out of your house. We're having a movie day and we're doing our nails. And I'm just so grateful to her. And then another person, when I had to leave my ex's house, I was like, I just can't do it. I don't know what to do. And she's like, I'm getting my car. I'm going to be there in 10 minutes. We're packing up your house and we're getting the fuck out of there. And she was there and we did it. And honestly, lesbians, like, they don't fuck around. We were done. We were out and never looked back. And that was really intense because it was all illegal. And I remember feeling so scared. It was really sad. And I was just saying it was that culmination of events and that's like the context that actually really put too much stress on me. And that was absolutely my breaking point. So that was the multiple saddest things that have happened to me, which culminated in the saddest point that I remember, which was pulling over on the side of the road and having a really big cry. And I don't cry easily. I cry over two things. I cry over dog adoption videos on YouTube and that. And so I also won't ever watch a movie where the dog dies. If there's a movie where the dog dies, I just turn off the movie. I was like, this doesn't need to be added to film history. Like, there's no film that was ever made better by a dog dying except John Wick. And that whole film is about a guy getting revenge for his dog. And I was like, I'm down for that because I would do the same thing. So murderous rampage. Probably should talk about rampages with guns to Americans. I felt John Wick, don't piss off assassins, I guess is the short story of that.
Okay, sorry I'd blocked you. Now I'm going to ask, based on your life experience so far, what is the best advice you can give everybody out there listening? So I want to go back to that story and we'll move into that question. So I was on the side of the road and having all these feelings that I wasn't good enough or that there was something really wrong with me. I think that was a really important part of it. And I actually remember thinking there was a part of my brain that I hadn't heard before. And it was like, shut up. Like, that's what the part of my brain said. This other voice was like, you're worthless. Like, there's no point. Don't like really, really down. And this other voice was like, shut up. I am so tired of hearing you speak, like this voice in my head. And it was like, if you were so bad, right, surely someone else would have tried to kill you by now. But that hasn't happened, has it? And I just sort of sat there and thought, and I was like, genuinely, how bad could I be? And, I'm a very educated person. I have 2 degrees. Both my parents were historians. So I have a few history references of comparing myself to like bad people in the world. And I was like, you know what? I'm really not that bad. Like, losing a job, losing a job is not the end of the world. Losing your partner hurts a lot and it's a huge change. And it is like a kind of a death in a way because your relationship has died and you grieve the relationship, but that person is still there. So I think that's hard. But I've done death before. And even though this person, is no longer in my life, the mistakes that were made, are entirely my own, but I was a different person and I didn't have the lessons that I do now from that. And this is where the advice comes in, because that voice that was challenging those negative ideas in my head, which was like this negative self-talk, was this positive self-talk. And it started really slowly. And I was speaking to a psychologist through this time because I was pretty upset. And we're really lucky in Australia because you can just see a psychologist for a mental health care plan for free. So, and in the pandemic, you could get more sessions for free. So I was really lucky. And this small voice, which was, you're not so bad. Let's just get home. Let's have a shower. Let's, have a hot chocolate or have something that you like to eat or go sit in the sun or go read a book. Like, let's just have this bad feeling for now, and then let's get ourselves together and let's think about this feeling tomorrow. But you can keep going. Like, you're really actually quite resilient for all these things to happen at once. Like, yes, it sucks and you feel really shitty right now, and I've never had that voice before. This voice came out of nowhere and it was like,
you know, it's going to be all right. And I didn't even realize truly at this point that I could say that to myself. Like, I was waiting on other people to say that to me. And I was waiting on other people to say, you're not a bad person. And I was waiting for all of this stuff to happen to confirm that, yes, I was a successful member of society and I had a great job and I was like, you know, a cool person and all this stuff. And actually, all of those external signs, they can all be taken away from you, which is very evident from those sad experiences that I just discussed. What is very hard to take away from you is that internal belief. So I thought about it a lot because I'm obviously in a much better place now. And I settled on just the idea of kindness because I think it's incredibly important to be kind. And don't just be kind to other people. And remember, being kind is not just being nice to someone because you want something. Being kind is doing something nice without expecting anything in return. And actually, you need to be kind to yourself first, right? Because there is a lot of logic in, you know, just like on a plane, they always say, put your own oxygen mask on first, because if your own oxygen mask isn't on first, you can't help others, which is so true. And that's what this advice that I would give back to your question, which is based on my experience, what advice would you give to others is be kind to yourself. The kinder you are to yourself, the more you can recharge your own battery, the more you'll be able to give kindness to others. And, you know, I'm not a spiritual person and I don't believe in God. And I know that's not a good thing to say to Americans, but I do believe in each other. And I do believe in the power of kindness, not in a stupid way. Like, if someone is an asshole to you, be an asshole back to them. Like, you don't need that toxic energy in your life. But do ask, why is that person being an asshole? Like, have they had a bad day? Is this just because they need to say something to someone and you're just the first person there? Or maybe they think of you as a safe space. And I guarantee you, if you treat that behavior with kindness, very quickly you break down these barriers of people and you end up making people and places better because you're willing to not keep that bad energy going by being kind to others. And you'll find the kinder you can be to yourself, generally the flow-on effect to everyone around you is also the same. So yeah, I really believe in kindness. It took me a long time, and it took me the longest time to learn to be kind to myself. And the advice I would give to people is being kind to yourself doesn't feel, if you have really negative self-talk like I did, and you have those thoughts in your brain that are like, I'm not good enough, or I'm not hot, or I'm not special, or I'm not amazing. The power of those thoughts on yourself is really pervasive. And if you can let me explain how I came to believing in kindness, I think it's like believing in God. I don't believe in God, but I do believe in kindness. And it requires a leap of faith for both. It requires a leap of faith to believe in God, and it requires a leap in faith to be kind. Because sometimes you are kind and nothing happens. But then if you continue to be kind and you continue to believe that you're not the worst person on earth and that you do your best and that there is a concerted effort that everyone is trying to do their best, the world becomes a lot easier to be in, rather than you're not worth it, because you're totally worth it. You just have to start with believing that you're worth it. And I think the best way to start believing that you're worth it is by being kind to yourself. So that's the advice I would give everyone. Be kind to yourself because you're worth it. And if you think you're worth it, then you're going to pass that on to others, you know?
I was always a person that was, I try to be a kind person and everything, and I was the worst person to myself. I was the hardest person on myself.
It feels so illogical. It's the same way believing in God feels illogical to me, but I understand why people believe in God, because it's belief. And when I understood believing in yourself, I understood believing in God, because sometimes it's not rational at those really dark moments to have to force yourself to think that I'm worth it. But you have to do it, because if the prevailing story is that you're not worth it, I can tell you it's a lot worse than, from personal experience, than the opposite, which is saying I am worth it and it's really shit right now, but I've got to believe that it'll get better. And it's really hard to do. I'm not saying that's easy at all, believing in yourself, but start small. Hey, I love your moustache today. You can say it to yourself, you know what I mean? Or you can just say to someone else. And those are external things. And once you get good at the external stuff, or I love your beard, or I love your hair, turn it to internal things. Or, you know, I really had a bad day today, but I think considering everything that got thrown at me, I did my best. That is positive self-talk, and it's really powerful. Even if you don't do a good job, say you did, because no one's perfect. We all make mistakes. If we were all perfect, there wouldn't be any problems, and then it would be really boring. Like, no one would read books or anything because they'd all be so terrible. So the problems are beatable if you believe in yourself, is what I'm trying to say. So be kind to yourself and others.
That got me right there. And I'm so glad that you found that for yourself too, because you are worth it. Everybody out there is worth it. That's the thing. Thank you so much for this today. All of it. I think people can really take a lot from everything that you said today.
We covered everything. We covered real estate. We covered swimming at Australian beaches. We covered bad times and what to do. And yeah, we went everywhere. It was a great questions. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you pulled out all those things through my armor, that where I've had to deal with being kinder to myself and everything, and made me tear up. So I consider that a win. I'm so glad I got to be on the show, and I've loved your page and your silliness and your costumes, and you just tell you're an awesome guy. And I hope one day we get to catch up, because in my 20s I did so much of Europe, and I'm hoping for my 30s I get to do a lot of America. So I hope one day I find myself in Knoxville, or if you come to Sydney, let me know. We can show you some great beaches. You've always got a place to stay in Tennessee, and I'll even take you to Dollywood. Yeah,
Dollywood. See, I love Dolly Parton. She also says be kind. Look at all these amazing people, and I really think Dolly Parton is an incredible person. She is extremely kind. Look at the effect that these people have in other people's lives, and tell me that belief in self and belief in kindness isn't having an impact and making things better. So yeah, I hope I didn't make you cry. I thought that big handsome chest and fur was impenetrable to tears.
Oh no, hopefully you can't see it in here, but I've been teared up since you started your advice. Like I said, it hit very close to home, because I've had to learn that myself, and it's not easy. Believe me, it's a day by day process, and some days are better than others.
Did what I say make sense? Because being kind is one thing, but actually believing in yourself to be kind is another challenge. Did you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. It's like you said, it actually builds that momentum to be kind. It's almost like you got to fuel the machine to keep things going. You got to believe and to be kind, and then be kind, and then when your battery gets low, you got to power up that belief again. And
I should say, I was zero battery. I was negative 10%, and it's in those darkest moments that you get to really discover who you are as a person. And since that point, I've been way more resilient, because really, in contrast and in comparison to that dark hour, everything else is pretty easy, and you learn what's important to you. And I guess I found out for me that's not money or, status or power or any of those things. It's about having a good time and not hurting other people and being kind to yourself. I think those are all really important things for a good life, I guess.
People, they want power, and honestly, one of the biggest powers you can have is the power to change people in a positive way. And it's like, if you want power, that's real power. Change somebody's life in a positive way. I mean, you can downtrod on people and everything, and you feel good, but like you raise somebody up and you help them, you both feel good. So
it's easier to chop down a tree than it is to grow one, because growing one takes time and nurturing and the right conditions. And the point is, if you don't do those things, you can't have the tree. So it's so important to recognize that you actively have to do it. It's not something like being kind is not something that just happens. You have to practice doing it to yourself and others, and start by saying, focus on your favorite thing and then work towards the more important stuff, which is like, you know what? I make mistakes. I'm human. I'm not going to punish myself if I make a mistake. It's not worth it. I'm going to learn from my mistakes, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to learn. And that's such a different perspective from you're worthless for making a mistake. So anyway, thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm very appreciative. I can tell you're a really beautiful man. I can see you're so liberated with your feelings, and I'm envious because I wish I could cry more easily, but it's just dogs. Just dogs. Dogs make me cry. Even just dogs that I said my ultimate dream. Do you see those videos where it's just like 50 puppies just like on someone? I was like, that would be, I'm such a dork. That's such a stupid thing. $35 million would also be great. Just FYI, if anyone's listening.
Maybe in the future we'll do this again, and your most memorable moment will be a time when 50 puppies were on you at one time. I hope that for you. I'm sending that out to the world right now.
Yeah, you're going to manifest those dreams, baby.
Thank you again, and I just can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, babes. And where can people listen to this podcast or this show?
It's going to be on iTunes. It's going to be on the Google Play Store. You can see it on YouTube, and you can also catch it on TikTok and Instagram soon. So
thanks so much, and keep in touch. Yeah, we'd love to talk to you again.
Of course. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to like and subscribe. You can also take me with you on your daily commute with the podcast version of The Five. Just check out the link in the description or get it wherever you get your podcasts.